Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show that covers all things marketing. The GSMC Marketing News Podcast gives you the latest marketing news, from what major businesses have planned for the coming year to the newest trends in advertising, from podcasts, digital and streaming, to the old standbys of radio, television, and billboards. Whether you're a marketing agent or a business trying to expand your brand, you've come to the right place. The GSMC Marketing News Podcast starts now.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the GSMC Marketing Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Mackenzie, and on tonight's episode, I am again coming to you live from my bathtub. I'm starting to consider this my bathtub coronavirus series. We're on episode 2 now of, we're in quarantine. Normally I have places to go. I have a studio to work in and all of these things, but the podcast has to keep going. You guys got to keep listening, so I am going to keep recording it, even if that means I have to sit in a bathtub with a microphone attached to my laptop and record these episodes for you guys there, because honestly, I love doing this show. I love getting to talk to you guys about marketing 3 times a week, every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So if you enjoy listening to me talking about it or you want to get involved in the conversation, I really encourage you to subscribe and write a review and connect with us through social media. We're very active on all of our social media platforms, and it is a great way to get in touch with us. If maybe you're in marketing and you want to be on the show, or maybe you have a question about marketing you want answered, that is a really great way to get in touch with us through social media or through the review down below. So on tonight's episode, we are actually going to be discussing podcast marketing. So for everyone currently listening to this podcast, you understand how big podcasts have really gotten over the past couple of decades, I would say. It's been about, I'd say 15 years that podcasts have really been such a huge form in the media world, and it's so impressive how they have been able to stay relevant and current. And, it seems like everybody and their mother has a podcast now. They're kind of like the new blogs. So I want to talk about the marketing strategies that are used behind some of the most successful podcasts and how you can use those marketing strategies in your own marketing. Because I understand that not a lot of you probably have a podcast or even have interest in recording a podcast. But I do believe you can use some of these tips to help you with your marketing. So all of that and more on tonight's episode of the GSMC Marketing Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Again, I am your host, Mackenzie, and we will be talking about what is new in the marketing world before we get started. So our first news story of today is that Coca-Cola will be joining other brands by freezing their marketing spend in the UK. So Coke has declared that it would suspend all the British marketing activities in response to the economic changes brought on by this COVID-19 pandemic. A spokesperson for the soft drink company said, "In light of a serious situation everyone is facing with regard to coronavirus, we don't believe it would be appropriate or consistent with the current challenges and uncertainty of our consumers to continue with the planned marketing of our brands in Great Britain at this time. As we all adjust to these very different circumstances, we will focus our efforts on how we will make a difference to our consumers, customers, and communities in the weeks and months ahead." So really interesting to see another really big company. Coca-Cola is obviously one of the biggest companies in the entire world. I have recorded podcast episodes on the Coca-Cola brand itself if you want to go listen and hear more about their marketing. So it's really interesting to see them be freezing their budget. And honestly, it does scare me a little just to sort of feel the future of what is happening currently in the marketing world because of the pandemic and what is going to happen next. And obviously companies like Coca-Cola and Disney and Netflix and all those really, really big companies aren't going to feel the burn as much as some smaller companies are, which is really unfortunate. So I do encourage you, if you own a small business and you're looking for some marketing techniques or marketing ideas to keep yourself afloat during this time, we did do a podcast episode on that as well, the coronavirus part 1, sick marketing. go over there and write in the review your small business link, send it over to us because I would love to check it out. I would love to buy something if that's possible, because supporting local businesses right now and supporting small businesses is so incredibly important. So I do encourage you to pop over there and take a look at that podcast. Our second story is that Instagram's CEO is managing one of the world's biggest social media networks from his garage. I just thought this story was so cute because obviously Instagram is also going to be working from home. Like, we're all doing it, so of course they are too. But it's really interesting to see that, it's the world's biggest social network and it has become like a company out of somebody's garage. So it's just sort of funny how it's gone like back in time almost, because normally other companies start in the garage and then they get really big. But so over the past week, the company launched a dedicated stay-at-home tab feature, hopefully to help connect everyone across the world right now and make you feel a little bit less alone, because you can go watch these stories of other people who are staying at home and kind of see what they're doing so that you feel a little bit less alone. Adam Mosier, the Instagram CEO, said, having our workforce, particularly our moderators, work from home is creating all sorts of challenges that we need to work through. Just generally, the amount of output we should be able to expect on a per-person basis is just going to go down. There is no way around that, which is why it is so important we get creative and make sure that we continue to make sure we keep people stay safe on the platform. So that's really the idea behind them creating this stay-at-home feature in the stories, is to really just encourage people to stay at home, stay safe, and just to sit on your couch and make an Instagram story and use the tag and then watch other people that use the tag, just so that we can all feel a little bit less alone, but we can all still be very safe and we can all still communicate and feel like we're a part of something bigger, even if we're just at home. So very interesting and really great to hear from Instagram, and really great to hear about them talking on the subject, because obviously they're also being affected by this, just like every company is being affected by this. Our third news story of today is that Google just confirmed a major Chrome update following the powerful COVID-19 security move. So last week, Google made a powerful security decision to pause Google Chrome updates amid the COVID-19 crisis. When Google paused Chrome updates, it was not clear when Chrome 81, which was going to be the newest update, would be released. Google said in the announcement when delaying the release that it needed to do so to ensure it could focus on security and increasing the number of employees work from home during the COVID-19 crisis. The browser maker also wanted to ensure that engineers aren't distracted from securing Chrome as they struggle to fix bugs and security issues that tend to arise with a new release. So basically what Google is saying is, hey guys, Chrome 81 is still coming, but we need to focus on what is happening right now, which is the COVID-19 crisis. So give us a minute. We're working on it. A lot is happening right now, especially because we're working from home. So honestly, again, it was just another great example of a company speaking out about how they are being affected by the virus. And I think it's really great when companies speak out about it, because obviously it's impacting them too. It is not just impacting you and me. It is not just impacting the fact that I have to record this podcast from the tub, right? Like, this really does touch everyone. So I think it was really great to see these three really big companies this week step out of their comfort zone a little bit and talk about what is happening, and talk about how it's hurting their companies, talk about how they're trying to help, and talk about how they're trying to help their consumer in the long run. So there you go. There were three big companies, Google, Instagram, and Coca-Cola, all being affected by the coronavirus and all being forced to delay products or create new products or stop their marketing spend altogether in certain areas of the world. Very interesting and very impactful stories. And guys, I'm sorry again, I know all three stories were about the coronavirus. Hopefully the next episode I'll be able to find a news story that's not talking about it, but let's face it, that's what's happening in the world right now. That is what is affecting the marketing world right now. So we're going to talk about it. I'm sorry, we are. Let me know your thoughts about these three companies and their decisions in the review down below. We are going to go ahead and take a short break from the podcast, but when we come back, I have 10 strategies straight from podcast marketing that might be able to help you in your small business. So stay tuned for that, because you are listening to the GSMC Marketing Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Mackenzie Jaquish, and I'll be right back.
Golden State Media Concepts Technology Podcast covers everything tech. The hottest mobile phones, tablets, games. We review it, rate it, test it. Whether you're Microsoft or Apple, Android or iPhone, we'll give it to you black and white. The Golden State Media Concepts Technology Podcast.
Everyone, and welcome back to the GSMC Marketing Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Mackenzie Jaquish, and we are on episode 2 of our bathtub series. This is a series where I record episodes from the bathtub because I don't have a studio to go to because of the ongoing COVID-19 crisis. Now, obviously, I fully understand that me having to record a podcast from the bathroom is like the smallest problem to have during this crisis. People have it so much more worse than I do. So I would love it, though, if everyone wrote in the review down below what annoying thing that they've had to deal with since entering into self-isolation, even if it's something so small as, like, you've been having to drink half calf and full calf coffee because you're trying to make your coffee last longer, or your kids are driving you nuts, or your boyfriend's driving you nuts because you have to work in the same one-bedroom apartment. Let me know. Write it in the review down below. Let's have a little bit of a group therapy session here and just vent about what is bothering us, because sometimes you got to complain about the little stuff to get through the big stuff. But speaking of the little stuff, except not so little, we are talking about podcasts on today's episode. I know, a podcast talking about a podcast. It's amazing. What a world. But podcasts have really become this necessary form of media for any large corporation to at least touch. So you'll see a lot of really big companies working with smaller podcasts, or what you will see a lot is celebrities and influencers going into the podcast world because they understand that that's just another platform for them to reach their audience and for them to monetize their career a little bit more. So obviously with all of that responsibility that gets put onto podcasts, there is a lot of marketing strategies and campaigns and advertising techniques that go into creating really great podcasts and ensuring their popularity. So I have put together of the top 10 best strategies from podcasts that podcasts use that I think could really help your business. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through 10 of them, and then we're going to come back and I'm going to tell you how those 10 can help your business, because I know not all of you are in the podcast world. So hopefully these tips will also help you with your business, no matter what it is. So get your pen and paper out, because we are going to get right into it. Number 1, they release at least 3 episodes on launch day. Now, not every podcast does this. Certainly not the one that you've been waiting and waiting for. They're not going to immediately release 3 episodes, because that's just not how life works, apparently. But a lot of smaller podcast companies will release 3 episodes on launch day, or at least have 3 episodes ready to go. This way, if people really like your podcast, they don't just have 1 episode to listen to and then have to wait a whole week for another one. Instead, they can listen to 3 right in a row. They have time to review. They have time to comment on not just 1 episode, but 3. So it's a really great way to show off the podcast and the product that they've been working so hard to create. This really goes hand in hand with, they're not only just releasing 3 episodes on the launch day, they probably already have the entire season recorded, but they're choosing when they release it. Most podcasts record episodes 6 weeks in advance, and that can seem like a lot of work, but it's how they stay on top of a routine, and it's how they stay on top of really releasing them on a certain schedule. So number 2, converting the audio to a YouTube video. This is really important as well. So I talked about how podcasts can become a platform for influencers and celebrities to reach their audience on another level, but you kind of also have to think about the reverse when you're creating a podcast is, okay, so I've recorded this podcast, I have published the podcast, how do I get an audience to want to listen to it? You kind of need to think backwards and say, even though I'm doing this for the people who already watch my YouTube videos, I now need to turn this into a YouTube video so that those people know how to come over here and find the podcast. So it's a real back and forth thing that goes on here with the marketing, but basically, if you're doing something on a podcast, talk about it on YouTube. If you're doing something on YouTube, talk about it on your podcast, and back and forth and back and forth. And this also is true for all of their social media platforms. If they're doing the podcast, they need to talk about it on Instagram and on YouTube and on Twitter and on Facebook and on TikTok now. So it's really about how much they communicate the product and how well they advertise it on those digital platforms. Number 3, submit your podcast for reviews at local media stations. So this doesn't have to be your local radio station or anything like that, but, submit it to local blogs, local influencers, local news stations, anything you really can for reviews. And if someone who likes your podcast, or even if they don't like your podcast, but if they're willing to write a review about it on their site, on their platform, it is really going to help that podcast grow and get a bigger audience than the one that they've already accumulated on their social media. Number 4, transcribe the audio. Guys, this is a pain. This is a pain in everybody's behind. I'm not going to lie. I hate transcribing audio, but it's so important, and I'll tell you why. Because that way it is accessible to anyone, and you can put it anywhere. You can turn it into pull quotes. You can turn it into a status. You can put it in a tweet. You could put it on a video reel and wrap it around. There are so many things you can do, but it all needs to start with how you transcribe that audio. So that is really, really big for podcasters, is that they need to transcribe that audio and make their content accessible for everyone. Number 5, throw to a week ratings party. So a week ratings party for podcasters, a lot of you, if you host a podcast, you probably already know what this is, but a 2 weeks rating party is really when the first 2 weeks is some sort of contest, if somebody will rate your podcast in the first 2 weeks of you hosting it. So it's a great way to sort of drive reviews and get people rating your podcast and get people excited about it. Just like number 6, run a giveaway contest. Giveaway contests are super fun. The one thing I would really encourage everyone to do if you have a podcast is to brand your giveaway contest. It can't just be, we're giving away free stuff. No, you're giving away free stuff that has to do with your podcast, and you're going to put your brand inside of that giveaway everywhere. Number 7, find partners to mention you. So this is all about podcasts that do a similar podcast to yours. So I know of like 5 other marketing podcasts that are super similar to the GSMC marketing podcast that I talk to them constantly. We're networking. We're trying to figure out if I can go on theirs, if they're going to come on ours. There's so much that goes into it because having a partner that is going to mention you in their podcast and maybe you'll mention them in yours is so incredibly important because then you're reaching a much bigger audience than the one you had. This also doesn't just have to be a podcast partner. Maybe you have a partner that's a clothing brand or a partner that's a radio host. I know those seem really related, but they're not. Maybe you have a partner that's in a band or anything like that, but some sort of platform where they're going to mention you and then you can mention them. Number 8 is very similar, being a guest on other people's podcasts. So this is really about promoting your own work, and to do that, you kind of got to do your own publicity, and you got to get yourself out there, and you need to be a guest on other people's podcasts. You need to do interviews for reviews. You need to talk to the media. You need to talk on social media. You need to share other people's stuff so that they share yours. You need to ask for help. So being a guest on other people's podcasts and really pushing yourself into that publicity world is going to help you grow notoriety in the podcast world and also, again, reach that bigger audience. Number 9, leverage your guest audience. So this one's really important too. If you have someone come onto your podcast or if you're on their podcast, leverage the heck out of their audience. do photos, do tweets, retweet them, talk about who they are, like all of their stuff, really make a big deal, make a meal out of being on their podcast, because then their audience is aware of who you are and that you're a clear supporter of what they like as well. Number 10, promote on social media. I can't stress this one enough. This one is so big for podcasts. It's just they need to be on every social media platform, and they need to be talking about their podcast on every single social media platform. Speaking of, if you're not already, go ahead and follow the GSMC Marketing Podcast on all of our social media platforms, because we're a podcast, so we're obviously promoting quite a bit over there. Not to mention, you'll get to join in on our conversations about marketing, ask questions, raise concerns, or tell me things you liked or tell me things you hated about tonight's episode. So go on over there to our Twitter, our Instagram, and our Facebook, because we are very active on all of our social media sites. Okay, everyone, we are going to go ahead and take a short break from the podcast, but when we come back, I have a way to take all of those 10 strategies and make them work for you in your marketing. So stay tuned for that, because you are listening to the GSMC Marketing Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Mackenzie Jaquish, and I'll be right back.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the GSMC Marketing Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. On tonight's episode, we are doing the funniest thing. We are talking about podcasts. I thought this episode would be really interesting because I was new to the podcast world when I started doing this, but I've learned so much about how to properly market a podcast and how to use advertising strategies and how to use marketing strategies to really find an audience for yourself and to create content that will impact the audience but be shared with the correct amount of people. And there really are just so many different strategies involved in creating marketing for your podcast and creating a world for the content you're creating that I thought we should discuss them and we should talk about them, because even if you don't host a podcast, even though I think we all have an idea in the back of our minds of, well, if I hosted a podcast, this is what it would be. Let me know in the review down below what your dream podcast idea is. I've definitely heard some really funny ones over the past little bit since I've told people I'm doing this. And I would just love to hear your guys's, because I always find that so interesting. But these ideas and these techniques are really created. We talked before the podcast about how they can help you in your podcasting world and how they've come from the podcasting world. But now I want to talk about how they could help you even if you don't host a podcast or you don't produce a podcast. So get your pen and paper out again. I'm sure you already have them written down. But I'm going to take the idea and we're going to flip it on its head so that it can help you in your marketing adventures. So number 1, releasing at least 3 episodes of your podcast on launch day. So how this can reflect you and your business is really making sure that you stockpile your inventory before you hit that ready, set, let's start selling button. Because say that you sell soap. I love using the soap example, guys. For those of you that are not new to listening to this podcast, you've heard other episodes, you know that I love talking about soap companies because they're just such an easy blanket statement for any company. I feel like anyone can be like, that is also similar to my company. So basically, let's say that you sell soap and you sell 12 different kinds of soap and you only have created one of each of those for your launch day. Well, that's great until you get 12 customers, but they all want to buy the same kind of soap. So really stockpiling your resources and your product for launch day is so important so that when somebody wants to buy something, they have the option to actually buy it, because if their first experience with you is the fact that they can't buy your item, they can't buy your product, you're already sold out, that's not going to leave a positive idea of you in their mind. But it also allows it that if you're stockpiling your inventory before launch day, they're able to get your product quicker, they're able to write reviews quicker, and they're able to talk about your product and reorder that much sooner. So super important that you stockpile your resources and your products before launch day. Number 12, converting the audio to a YouTube video. So this one is actually very similar to how you would use it in a podcast as well. If you have a platform, talk about it on your other platforms. Don't just be like, well, I make soaps and I only talk about it on Etsy. No, I want to hear about your soaps on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, your podcast, everything you have, because your soap company, if it's something you really want to see become successful and you really want to see it reach new levels of engagement with an audience, then you need to make sure you're engaging with that audience on every single platform you have. So find a way to take your product, convert it into something else to work on all of these different platforms. In the same way, converting your podcast into audio to put on a YouTube channel, you can create a video of, especially right now, how to wash your hands properly for your Instagram story. But then you're going to take a photo for your Instagram feed, and you're going to do a tweet with a photo for your Twitter. So always converting your assets into different assets for each platform is really important as well. Number 3, submitting your podcast to the media. This is super important, and it's super important for your company as well. If you're a local company, if you're in a small town, a small city, even if you're in a large city, find an organization that is willing to talk, rate, or review your product, and then submit it like crazy until they do. Because if you can get a stamp of, this company reviewed our product and really liked it, this company wrote a review of our product and really liked it, this influencer uses our product and really likes it, all of those are just more and more things to put into your tool belt, to put into your media kit of, here's our references, here's our reviews, and here's why you should trust us. So definitely try submitting your product to any company that is willing to talk about your product. Number 14, transcribing your audio. But really what transcribing your audio turns into is making your content accessible for everybody. So right now, is your product accessible for everyone? Is it gluten-free? Is it vegan? Is it all of these things you need to consider so that no matter who it is, no matter what they are, no matter what they care about, no matter what their beliefs are, if they go to your company looking to buy a product, do you have it accessible for them? That is something that is so extremely important and so easily overlooked. So definitely right now, take a look at your product. Try to see if there's any errors in it in which, someone who's vegan couldn't use it because we use eggs in our soap. Guys, I'm going to be real honest right now. I don't know how to make soap. I don't know if that was obvious, but I don't know. Does it require eggs? I doubt it. But I know there can be vegan soap. I don't know. If you know how to make soap, write it in the review down below, because just personally, I would like to know. So number 15, throw a 2-week ratings party. So a 2 weeks rating party is when, I kind of explained it earlier, but I listened back and I was like, I don't know if this is the best explanation, so I'll just reiterate it again. It's when for 2 weeks, these are your best episodes, you're pushing out the ratings so that people are like listening to those episodes. Maybe you're doing more episodes. A really nice example actually to relate it to is how some YouTubers do Vlogmas, where for the month of December, they're just pushing out vlogs every day. That's what a 2-week rating party is. So how can you do that with your company? Could you do that for 2 weeks, you're going to have a sale every single day? For 1 week, you're going to have a sale every hour. So it's definitely something to consider if you just want some hype and some attention around your product. Number 6, very similar, running a giveaway contest. I talk about giveaway contests constantly on this podcast because they are just such a good idea. It's a great way to get your product in the hands of the consumer. It is a great way to show your company having fun on social media, and it is a great way to interact with your audience and a great way to reach a new audience if you're doing a giveaway contest that is like, tag this person, tag 5 people, reshare this. That way your content is getting pushed out to other people's audiences and other people's audiences. So that's really fun and really cool. Number 7, find partners to mention you. So partners aren't exactly the same as before when I was saying reviewers or people to kind of give that stamp of approval. Instead, a partner could be, like I said earlier, another podcast could be a partner, and they could be talking about my podcast, and I'll talk about their podcast. But for you, maybe your partner as a soap company is a towel company or a body wash company or a shampoo company. Just companies that are similar that you can sort of partner up with to say, hey, maybe we'll do giveaways together, maybe we'll attend similar events, and most importantly, we're going to collaborate together so that we can build off of each other's audiences. Which is also why you should be a guest on other people's podcasts. Now, here's the thing. You might luck out and the towel company does have a podcast and you can go on there. But really the point and the heart of that strategy is that you really have to be your own publicist and you need to make sure you're advertising your company. You're trying to get out there. You're doing interviews. You are talking to other people. You are going to events. You're pushing yourself and your company to be the best it can be. Number 9, leverage your guest audiences. So this is taking a look at your partnership and saying, how can I really involve myself more with your audience? How can I make sure that your audience knows that I am also producing a really great product? So they shouldn't just follow you, they should follow both of us. You can do things by tweeting and retweeting your partner's content, talking about them, taking photos, getting together, working together, and making it clear that there's a partnership there so that you can leverage their audience. Number 20, promote on social media. It is so important, guys, that you are covering all of your bases no matter what company you have. You need to be on every social media platform talking about your company. It is so incredibly important, and if you're not doing it, I would love to hear why, because in this day and age, it is beyond important. Okay, everyone, that is it for tonight's podcast. Thank you so much for joining me for episode 2 of the Bathtub series. Thank you so much for listening to the GSMC Marketing Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Mackenzie Jaquesh, and I'll see you next time.
You've been listening to the GSMC Marketing News Podcast, part of the GSMC Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcasts on SoundCloud, Stitcher, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to any podcast app, and you'll find all of the shows from the GSMC Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, from business news to weird news, you'll find it all on the GSMC Podcast Network. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.